quick. Ooh, look at Comrade Diego on already. Black Power Comrade.
TP. Black Power, y'all, come on in the room while we get started. Y'all like my glasses?
Put my glasses on. Black Power Comrade Daniel, what's up, y'all? It's the last revolutionary book trap of the year, y'all. I want to wear my hat, but Comrade Nyah got me a bomb-ass hat.
You see it? You can see it now.
Okay, let's see. Oh, the wrong way. Damn, these stupid-ass glasses. Y'all come on in this room. Thank you for sharing, Comrade Daniel. I mean, how it look? Can you see?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. It got, it says Happy New Year on it right there. But Black Power, everybody. Black Power, everybody. Welcome to the Revolutionary Book Trap with your boy, Chief Dia, and my girl. These glasses won't get right. Okay, hold on.
They special.
Hold on. Okay, I think I got it. Okay, bam. There you go. 2020! Black Power Comrades, thank you for joining us again for the Revolutionary Book Trap. It's your boy Thea and my girl,
Chief Nyah. What's
yes,
up?
and it is the last Revolutionary Book Trap of the year 2019, Comrade. How you feeling?
I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
Can you see in 2020 now? You got your 2020 vision on?
I see.
Okay, you see the future. All right, comrades, when y'all come in, please make sure you share, and put in the comments, hashtag shared when you shared it. As you all know right now, we are still on our fourth book?
H. Rap Brown, Asada, yes, Huey, and then this is our fourth book. Yep.
Yes, we are on our fourth. I can't speak, y'all. I'm just so excited about today's show. But we are on our fourth book, How Did Europe Underdeveloped Africa, by our comrade Walter Rodney. So we're going to be wrapping up, actually, chapter 2 today. And then next week, we'll be moving on to chapter 3. So that's going to be good. I hope you all have your hashtag read that back portions prepared so we can have a great, powerful, deep, and profound discussion. But also, we know that this episode and all of our episodes, well, the next 2 episodes, will be fundraisers for the Atlanta Food Drive, taking place January 18th at Woodruff and Hurt Park. AAA is lit, T-E-E-E. So, what does that mean, Comrade Nyah? What are we trying to do this morning?
So we're going to raise another $100.
Woo woo!
So that we can make this food drive a success. Of course, the more money we bring in, the more people we can feed.
Yes.
We want to feed at least 100, but it'd be dope if we could feed at least 200.
Yes.
So with your help, we can do that. So we want to meet that goal. We are going to be serving sandwiches, turkey and ham sandwiches, fruit, granola bars, and bottled water. And we're also going to be giving out a pair of socks.
You laughing at I think Sid laughing at my hat.
Why are they hating?
Anyways, y'all, thank you for that, Comrade Nyah. Yes, so today we have last Sunday. Well, first, let me back up. Let us thank everybody who made a pledge or who donated for our last show. Last show we were able to raise $110. So today we're going to raise $100 for today's episode. Now let me tell you how you can do this, okay? You can donate immediately by going to CashApp, and the CashApp name is the $ Black Hammer, or you can go to GoFundMe.com/BlackHammerOrg, or you can go to blackhammer.org and donate through there. Or you can also make a pledge, meaning that you want to donate, but you want to donate at a later date. So you can put the comment in the comment section, the amount that you want to donate and the date that you will be able to turn in your donation, and then we'll just call you, give you a little sweet reminder, let you know when to turn to see your donation. So we're trying to collect all the proceeds, all the resources by the 12th of next month. So that will give us like maybe a week's time to go ahead and get all of the food so we can prepare and things of that nature. So again, we're trying to raise $100. Don't stop laughing, Robert. Stop laughing.
And Sid said he wasn't hating. He thinks you're adorable.
Oh, thank you. All right, Black Power, y'all. So before we go ahead and wrap up chapter 2, let me get at least 5 people who say that they can at least pledge $5. You can pledge $5 to our goal today of $100. Let me see it. Let me see it. You can just pledge $5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then also, if you aren't able to donate, you can also take, we have all of the links pinned right here in your in the comment section, so you can share it with your family members, your friends, anybody who you think would be supportive of what we're trying to do. And we just came out of a fantastic Forging the Hammer Political Education monthly study with the comrades here in the organization. And one of the main points that we spoke about is we spoke about revolutionaries and our relation to the masses of people. And just the understanding that us as revolutionaries, the Black Hammer organization as a revolutionary organization, would not exist without the support of you, without the support of the people, without the support of the masses. And ultimately, understanding that the war that we're fighting, the revolutionary war that we're fighting for the liberation of African and colonized people, will not happen. It cannot happen without the participation of you, the masses of people. And I mean, it's just like without you, we're nothing. We're absolutely nothing. So just really want to express a profound appreciation for everybody who donated. And yeah, so I think we have Sid who says he'll send something. How much you gonna send, Sid? How much? Somebody might want to match your donation in the comment section. Huh?
Be an inspiration for everybody else.
Yes. All right, come on, y'all. Let's see some pledges. We're trying to raise $100 this morning. I know we can do it. We did it last week, so we're going to do it again. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And again, we're wrapping up chapter 2 of How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. And previously, in our previous episode, what Walter Rodney was doing was providing examples of African societies in their development stages prior to European invasion. And the last African society we stopped on was the Western Sudan. So now we're picking up on the Interlacustrine Zone. And if y'all like me, when I first heard that word, I was like, what in the hell is that? So you know what I did? I had to look it up. Ooh, Black Power, we got a pledge of $15 by Comrade Stephanie. Black Power, Comrade. Thank you so much for your donation. So now we only need to raise what? 85 more dollars. Come on, y'all. We got until 12 o'clock to do so. I know we can do it. Black Power. Thank you so much, Comrade Stephanie. Okay, so yeah, pretty much the Interlacustrine Zone is pretty much Eastern Africa. And so that is composed of, you have Buganda, Rwanda, and Bunyoro. And so what Walter Rodney speaks to first in this summation is that we understand that the eastern side of Africa was developing at a way slower rate than all of the other areas within Africa. And he makes the comment, even that they went for a long time without the use of iron tools. And he even says, for one thing, the people of East Africa acquired iron tools at a much later date than their brothers in the north and west. And secondly, their range of technology and skills was narrower. And I think that's kind of evident in what we even see in today's times, because I mean, when you look up pictures of Kenya and things of that nature, you still see our African brothers and sisters, and it's no shade, but they're dressed in, you know, traditional African attire, which is absolutely beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Right.
And I think in some ways that is what Walter Rodney is kind of speaking to right now at this point. So from there, he speaks about the composition of the population of people that was in the area, in the Interlacustrine Zone. Y'all, these colonizer words getting on my damn nerves now, okay?
It was definitely
So what he says, so he lays out that the Buni Yoro, which was the most prominent people within the Interlacustrine Zone, and he says that those regions were comprised of Buni Yoro, which we just spoke to, and Kole, Toro, Karagwe. Look at you, Conrad Nyah. Yes, girl, get me together. And also Buganda, all of which fall in Uganda except for
Karagwe,
which is in Tanzania. So he lays that out, and he also lets us know that the ruling dynasty at that time was the Bachwezi. And it's also commented that the Bachwezi was pretty much like an immigrant population that moved into this area, and they were a pastoralist group, which we spoke to, you know, in our last episode, which is pretty much like people who maintain pastures, you know, like big land. I want to say plots, but I guess
they tend to the land, and that's how they survive, and you know, they live off the land and they tend to the land.
Yeah. So he speaks about that, and just that he says that the Buchezi were able to come in with such a dominant force because of what they were able to provide. And one of the things he says that they were able to bring to the area was the horned, humped cattle. And pretty much at this time, if you had access to large amounts of land, if you had access to large amount of domesticated animals such as cattle, or, you know, if you were growing, if you had, you know, like methods of agriculture and things of that nature, pretty much you became like the so-called ruling class of that area. And that's what we see with the with the
Bachwezi, whatever they call. I don't want to say whatever because that's an African, you know, term, but Bachwezi or Bachwezi.
Yeah. Black power. So, and one other thing that was unique about the Bachwezi is that when they
we gotta decolonize our
too, man.
y'all.
I'm sorry. Black Power Comrade Tariba, Black Power Comrade Muhammadu, y'all make sure y'all shared. Please go to BlackHammer.org, $BlackHammer.org in the Cash App. Make your $5 donation now. We got $85 more to raise before 12 o'clock. I gotta get up out of here and go to work, but we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it, right?
We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. All
right.
All power to the people. That's what.
All power to the people. Black power. So what was unique what he raises in this chapter is that when the Bachwezi immigrated to this area, instead of forcing their language upon the local population, they adopted the language of the inhabitants of the Interlacustrine Zone. And I think that was just, you know, like very unique versus what we see, you know, in terms of European invasion, where wherever the hell the fuck they went, it was genocide. They stripped away our traditional spiritual systems. They forced English in our mouths, down our throats. Even we see with Spain. And you know, for a long time, this is so crazy, that I, and like a lot of, other brothers and sisters, felt that, thank you for sharing, Comrade Ghazi, that Spanish was indigenous to South America. And I didn't understand, I didn't know until later that it was Spain that, of course, colonized South America. And that's why, a lot of indigenous people to this land speak Spanish today.
Right.
And I just thought that was, that was just very interesting to me. So he also speaks about like the labor in this area, like the feats that the people, the local people were able to achieve under the Bachwezi dynasty. I'm sorry, y'all. So he says there was ironworking, there were bark cloth making. They had this type of sinking well shafts into stone. I can't, in my mind, I can't even, like, how do you even do that?
I don't know, but they figured it out though. And I appreciated reading about them, bringing these things to exist, because again, we're taught that, they didn't have these types of advancements in their development, and we're seeing that they did. And later when we get into the chapter, when we go through the end of the chapter, we'll see that, there were even European societies who came that
it was like
comparable.
Oh,
what? Really?
They're doing like this over here.
So,
and that's also my hashtag read that back, the part that you was just talking about. But yeah, so let's see. What else was he able to talk about? Okay, so yeah, and I had to look up what, because next he talks about earthwork systems, and I had to look that up to understand exactly what that was. And so pretty much it's like, I don't want to say like it's, I guess you could say it's like comparable to a moat that you would see.
Oh, like an irrigation type thing?
Yeah. So he said that was evident to the fact that they did this to first, form some type of defense, Black Proud Comrade Robert, and to also enclose their cattle so the cattle wouldn't get away. And one portion of this chapter that I wanted to read, which I thought was very important, and I'm on page 73 right now, and he says, the largest of the earthworks at Bigo, with ditches extending over 6.5 miles. So after that, he goes into the division of labor, and I think we even spoke to this previously, where we understand, this is how he says the class stratification came into picture. And so much so that the pastoralists and the cultivators were like pretty much the crux of where we see this class stratification play out. And in most terms, the pastoralists were dominant over the cultivators. Because the pastoralists, like Comrade Nyah was just saying, had access over the land. So if you rule the land, can't nobody do nothing without your permission. And as a cultivator,
you're just working the land.
You're working the land.
Yep. And I appreciate that too, because when you think about that, when we were talking earlier about pastoralists, when they're talking about like you're basically over the land and you tend to the land, that includes the cattle.
Yes.
And the cattle can produce milk. Cattle can produce meat. Cattle can produce
even a manure child.
Yes, that encourages crops to grow.
Right.
So that was a big asset, and still is today.
Thank you so much for everybody that's sharing, y'all. We got $85 and 85 more dollars to raise. So please put your pledges in the comments. If you aren't able to donate today, just put your amount in the day you plan on donating. We trust somebody's going to follow with you around your donation, so you don't forget. Or you can just go ahead and donate immediately by going to CashApp, and it's the $BlackHammer.org. Our next food drive for the Atlanta Unit chapter is coming up January 18th, and we're going to be in Woodruff in Hurt Park, which is situated in the downtown area. And this is where we did our work, our first food drive here in the Atlanta unit.
Yep.
And I mean, the park was just full of our homeless brothers and sisters, just struggling to basically eat. And the response that we saw when we got there, you know, in terms of feeding them, it was just astronomical. I mean, we ran out of plates of food like that.
Yeah.
And, you know,
20 minutes.
Yeah. So that's what we want to see happen again on January 18th. And if you are located in Atlanta, or if you have family members located in Atlanta, hit us up on our social media platforms. We would love to have more hands on deck to help us volunteer, to you know, help us put the sandwiches together, help us put the bags together and things of that nature, so we can provide the necessities to our people. Okay? This is how you make the masses pretty much fall in love with the revolution, by meeting the interests of the people.
That's right.
Meeting their interests. And right now, immediately, what we see, what all of us can see, and no matter where we're located, is the homeless population. And that's the most basic means of being able to organize and reach our people, through food. Everybody needs to eat. Everybody has to eat in order to survive. And we understand, under colonialism, under capitalism, we aren't able to provide that to we aren't able to provide that to our people. So we're going to go beyond that, and we're going to organize and do it ourselves. So please donate what you can. Go to CashApp $BlackHammer.org. Go to GoFundMe.com/BlackHammer.org. Go to BlackHammer.org and donate what you can today.
And I want to give a shout out to my brother-in-law who donated $40 to the food drive. That's Derek Thomas. So yeah, shout out to you. Black
Power, y'all. Okay, so again, we got $85 more to raise to reach our $100 goal. So again, donate. All right, Black Power. So where was we at?
We were talking about the Bakwezi and the pastoralists and the land.
Oh, okay. Okay, so the portion that I'm getting ready to read is where Walter Rodney pretty much lays out how the class stratification came to be within the Interlacustrine Zone, which again is pretty much all of East Africa. And he says, the division of labor between pastoralists and cultivators and the nature of their contacts intensified the process of caste formation and class stratification in the Interlacustrine area. The pastoralist behemoth had imposed their rule over the cultivators, or the Bay rule. Social classes grew out of a situation of changing labor relations. The earthworks of Bigo and elsewhere were not built by voluntary family labor, and some form of coercion must have also been used to get the cultivators to produce a surplus of for their new lords. For instance, the Pachwezi are said to have established a system by which young men were conscripted into the king's service and were maintained by Baru, who occupied and cultivated land assigned for the support of the army. So again, remember, like within all of these different African societies that we're discussing right now, what Comrade Walter is laying out is the transitional.
That's right.
Yeah, the transitional. Is transitional a word?
I can make it one.
Okay.
But the transitional phase from the communalism to the feudalism.
Yeah, feudalism at this point is pretty much what he's speaking on. So, So he says that there are questions right now around where the Bachwezi came into being, again, because they were an immigrant group into the Interlacustrine Zone. And this is what he has to say about that. It is possible that they were not immigrants. Nevertheless, it is generally held that they were light-complexioned pastoralists coming from the north. Assuming that this was so, it is essential to stress that whatever was achieved in the Interlacustrine region in the 14th and 15th centuries was a product of the evolution of African society as a whole and not a transplant from outside.
Right.
Meaning that all this development that we're seeing right now happened internally, exactly. And again, you got to keep in mind that this whole crux, the conversation that we're having now, is based upon that. The internal evolution of African societies that, again, was disrupted by the invasion of European colonizers. So, Yeah. Did you have anything to say?
No, I appreciate everything you've lined out because everything you said about the fact that these were internal advancements that we did, that was done in Africa before any type of interaction with Europe or any other people. And he goes through this area and other areas and talks about all the similarities of, ironworking, irrigation systems, trading with each other and things like that, and that those things were already taking place even before that happened.
Yeah.
So, I'm really happy that he's laying this out.
Yeah. Excuse me. Black Power. Okay, so before we move on to the next African society, which is Zimbabwe, there was another portion of this chapter that I found, it was, how can I say, like, it stood out to me, this portion of the chapter where he speaks about Christianity and Islam. And we understand, pretty much for all of the African societies that we've discussed so far in this chapter, a lot of the labor that we saw was influenced by religion. And just like we see all of these, Black Power Comrade Robert is going to donate $5 today. Black Power Comrade Robert.
And Sai just pledged $40 when they get paid on Wednesday.
So, Comrade, I'm bad with math, Comrade.
So what is that? So we got 90, and then we had... So we had $50 we got to raise.
We just need $50 more, y'all. Just $50 more.
I'll send you an upgrade. Okay. And then Stephanie's encouraging comrades to donate.
Black Power.
So yeah, we can do it.
Right on, comrades. We can do it. We can do it. Okay, but yeah, back to what I was saying. Because a lot of the ruins that have been studied by archaeologists and all of those different things of that nature is based around, the remnants of temples, of churches, and things of that nature. So again, that's just an indicator of what was able to influence labor within these African societies. And even like Walter Rodney said previously, like religion and government within these African societies were very close related. So how do you motivate the labor within these African societies, which was through religion? Yep. But that is not to understate the fact that a lot of these, let's see. Okay, so we understand that Christianity and Islam is not indigenous to Africa. So again, we can't forget that there was a factor of coercion in the labor that we saw. But this portion that I'm getting ready to read now, Walter Rodney pretty much, only deepens that understanding. And he says, Christianity and Islam have been most frequently associated with large-scale building both inside and outside of Africa. That is to be explained not so much by the actual religious belief, but because membership in a powerful universal church gave the ruling class of a young state many advantages. A Christian or Muslim prince had access to a literature culture in a wider world. He dealt with traders and craftsmen professing that religion. He used administrators and churchmen who were literate, and he could travel to parts of the world such as Mecca. Above all, the universal religions replaced traditional African ancestral religions in Ethiopia, Sudan, Egypt, the Maghreb, and progressively in the Western Sudan, because Christianity and Islam were not rooted in any given family community, and therefore could be used to mobilize the many communities that were merging into the state. However, religious beliefs which had been accepted by a single clan or ethnic group could be elevated in the same form or in its slightly altered form to become the religion of the whole state. This was the situation in the Interlacustrine Zone, and indeed in most parts of Africa outside the regions already described. So we understand, just like Walter Rodney just laid out, that the traditional African spiritual system was based in ancestry. So meaning if me and Nyah, you know, we're brothers and sisters, we're all a part of the same family, like our religion was based in honoring our grandparents, our mothers, our ancestors, anybody that had come before us. So you can almost understand how it made it not difficult in the sense that my family, my relations is not the same as, you know, other villagers might be in like the next village that's like up the way or something of that nature. But I think what Walter Rodney is speaking to is based on the fact that all Africans had an ancestral traditional spiritualism. Now we understand that all of the Africans were not related, but we were the same in the sense that we honored our ancestors. So just like Christianity and Islam was able to mobilize people globally, if our process of evolution was not interrupted, we could have united just based on the fact that we honored our ancestors. So that way we could use that, you know, that spiritual system to mobilize other Africans in different villages to say, okay, let's build temples to honor our ancestors. We may not be related. We may not be related, but we understand that we're doing this to honor our ancestors. So just like based on the fact that you can come in on this day to honor your grandparents, your grandfathers, and then I'll come in the next day or something else of that nature. And I'm just saying that because, you know, that lays the basis for the labor, you know, which in turns brings the building of the infrastructure, the formation of the state and things of that nature. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I did want to point out that it seems as though like those belief systems and those spiritual practices that were in place prior to the coming of Islam and Christianity really reflected the nature of Africans in that, you know, wherever they were. We read about this earlier, where, you know, it's basically like a reflection of family ties, ancestral ties, honoring the ancestors, communalism, sharing. We make what we need for the group of people that we need it for. So if we need cloth, we're going to formulate enough cloth to withstand, to hold us over. Food production and things like that was basically for the community, not necessarily for, you know, the building of the state, which is what he just said here, where it basically, these larger scale faith systems really had no sense of, I mean, they talk about like lineages and things like that, but it was more so for the domination and control and building of the state, which does reflect that they are transitioning over into another, you know, way of doing things, communalism transitioning into feudalism and the erecting of the state for purposes of trade, mass production, and things of that sort. Even without the interference of Europeans, because we didn't need them. But we would have been able to, you know, still, you know, erect our own type of system.
Blackfire, thank you so much for that, comrade. All right, y'all. So we only got $50 more to raise to reach our goal. So please go ahead and put your pledges in the comments, or go ahead and head over to CashApp at blackhammer.org with $, then blackhammer.org, gofundme.com/blackhammer.org, or just go to our website, blackhammer.org, and make your donations today. Okay, so the next area that he speaks to now is the Zimbabwe area. And so he starts off with laying out that pretty much in this area in the 15th century, it was under the rule of the Mutapa Empire, which were also pastoralists. And just like all of the other different African societies we discussed, a lot is mentioned about like the different structures that they built. And one of the things that he lays out here is the evidence of the temples that was built in Zimbabwe, which were stone temples.
Yes.
And he lays out that these Africans within this area were pretty much making structures out of granite. Like, and we all know how strong and resistant
that is. granite
could be. So, yeah.
Laying of bricks on one on top of the other, cement style, really great, structures.
Yeah.
That were present.
And we also understand, just outside of this book, Zimbabwe is located at the southernmost section of the continent, pretty much South Africa. And if you understand the history of South Africa and what has happened in this area for our people, in terms of apartheid,
yep.
And the whole history of that aspect, and the neo-colonialist sellout, Nelson Mandela, and just everything that has, even what's happening now. I mean, previously we've seen struggles about, white people in South Africa killing our brothers and sisters in this area. I believe it was almost last year where we had this African official who was basically trying to mislead the people by saying, okay, we're going to take the land back from the white people and do all of these other things, which we know was definitely not tied to the interests of our African brothers and sisters located in Zimbabwe. But if you aren't familiar with apartheid, we aren't able to go into it right now, but I do encourage you all to look it up and to understand the history of it and what that means. And pretty much you can compare it to what we saw in the southern states in America, in terms of Jim Crow law and all of those different things like that.
Stephanie wants you to go into a little bit about why Nelson Mandela is a sellout. Do we have time?
Not necessarily, Conrad, but what I can say is that when we come back for our next episode, I'll have some facts for you. And I don't want to bypass your question, but I want us to be able to finish this chapter. And girl, I also gotta be to work real soon. So,
Plantation is calling. But,
yeah.
But there are some facts, and that is a really good question because his wife was quite the opposite.
It was extremely the opposite, and did not have a problem criticizing her husband.
Yes.
And just even on the most simplest basis, Nelson Mandela is pretty much almost responsible for all of the regulations that we see going on in Zimbabwe right now, and made it easier for white imperialist countries to come into South Africa and do what they did. And just because he went to jail and never mind. Okay, so getting back to Zimbabwe, so pretty much what I just want us to understand that he says Zimbabwe is a term which was used to designate the Zambezi Limpopo cultures in the few centuries preceding the European arrival, because it was from the 11th to the 14th century that there flourished the societies which most characteristics feature was the building of large stone palaces known collectively as Zimbabwe. So he also makes mention of Cecil Rhodes, which is another, before I get into that, it was another part right here that I had highlighted. And he says, however, it is definitely necessary to reflect on the amount of labor which would have been required to construct the buildings within the Zimbabwe region up until the 15th century. The workers may well have been from particular ethnic groups who were subjugated by other ethnic groups, but in the process of subjugation, they were acquiring the character of a social class whose labor was being exploited. So at this point right now, what Comrade Walter is laying out again is the formation of class stratification. And again, this is, what he's speaking to again is the transition from communalism into the elementary phases of feudalism. So, and I just want to unite with this comment that I see right here where I can't see the name, but I know it says, fuck Rhodes. Yes, fuck Rhodes. And that is another, white nationalist, imperialist pig that I encourage comrades to look up to. To look up and read about, because he also played a major role in the colonization and the invasion of Zimbabwe. And I can't go into too much facts, but I will say that Cecil Rhodes is responsible for over 60,000 deaths in Zimbabwe. And that's not even the most minuscule thing that this pig has done to our brothers and sisters in Zimbabwe. So y'all can look him up as well. So yeah, so in Zimbabwe, we also saw a lot of mixed farming, with cattle being important. He also, Walter Rodney lays out the gold trade within this area, which was a stimulus for trade, for external trade. And he just speaks about how, you know, Africans in Zimbabwe were already mining the gold prior to European invasion, and they weren't doing it in large quantities that we see now. But Africans were already mining the gold.
And I appreciate him laying that out again, because again, when we know that we were invaded, Africans were invaded, and then the mining took place. We know that it was due to capitalism coming to effect, and you know, the trading and the large scale that it was needed then, and that became the underlying currency for how things were traded. And in Africa, even though we mined, we traded with one another, and we made gold into nice things or whatnot. We didn't do it we weren't destroying the fucking planet,
right? Exactly.
by doing that, and at the rate that we were using it.
And he also lays that out as well, where he says, however, gold is required in large quantities only in a society which produces a large economic surplus and can afford to transform part of the surplus into gold for prestige purposes, meaning for the overindulgence, basically pretty much greed, capitalist greed, and into coinage, into money to promote capitalism. The pre-feudal African societies did not have such a surplus, nor the social relations which made it necessary for gold to circulate in a great deal internally. Hence, it was the presence of Arab traders as far as south of Sofala, in the Mozambique Channel, which spurred Zimbabwe to mine more gold for export, just about the same time in the 11th century when the stone building was beginning.
And then he goes on to say the implication is that a number of factors coincided, namely the intensification of class stratification, the state of consolidation and of production and building. So all these things were happening at around the same time, which was really forcing Africa to really, in order to keep up or to try to, people are coming over, we're trading this, and there's a need and there's a demand for this. We have to do that. He says it a little bit earlier where, even though there's still a tendency to consider the achievements with a sense of wonder, rather than with the comments that it was a perfectly logical outgrowth of human social development with Africa as part of the universal process by which man's labor opened up new horizons. And so they were, at the point where they were outgrowing the system that was currently serving the needs of the people, and they were having to transform to that. So, but I mean, just the fact that he laid out that all these things coincided, the stone building and the mining and all these things were happening at the same time. I think that's important.
Yeah, that's very important. So, continuing on in the chapter, he speaks briefly about the different populations within the area. He speaks about I'm getting my words jumbled up. But he says, it is believed that the inhabitants of Zimbabwe in the 11th century to the 14th century were Sotho-speaking, but by the time the Portuguese arrived, a Shona-speaking dynasty had taken control of most of the region. That was the Razwi clan, which set up the state of Mutapa between the Zambezi and the Limpopo. The ruler was known as the Mwene Mutapa, which apparently meant the great lord of Mutapa to his own followers, but was held to mean the great pillager by peoples whom he conquered and wielded together in a single empire. The first individual to hold the title Mwene Mutapa ruled from 1415 to 1450, but the dynasty had already been growing prominent before the date. The capital was at first sited at Great Zimbabwe and later moved north. What was important was that the Mwene Mutapa appointed governors to rule over various localities outside the capital in a manner comparable to that of the Western Sudanic empires of the Interlacustrine states.
I want to say something too. I knew this girl who had an African name. Her name was Wandishi.
Okay.
And I think it started with an M, but the next letter was a W. And I think, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I think the M is silent in that sense. I don't know. So if you're African and you know, or if you just happen to say, correct me, because I want to know. So I'm just curious if this is Wing Mutapa. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so he pretty much lays out the foundation of the classes and, you know, who was ruling again from the 11th to the 14th century. And there's in this portion of the chapter that I highlighted, which I thought was important to read, was pretty much where he speaks about the development, you know, before the coming of the Europeans in relation to Zimbabwe. And I'm going to read that part. So it says, "It has been considered necessary for the purposes of illustration to consider some, though by no means all, of the outstanding areas of development in Africa before the coming of Europeans. Nor should it be forgotten that there were innumerable village communities emerging to become states that were small in size, but were sometimes sharply stratified eternally and displayed an impressive level of material advance. Those described above should be sufficient to establish that Africa in the 15th century was not just a jumble of different tribes. There was a pattern, and there was historical movement. Societies such as feudal Ethiopia and Egypt were at the furthest points of the process of evolutionary development. Zimbabwe and the Bachwezi states were also clearly on the ascendant away from communalism, but at a lower level than the feudal states, and a few others that were not yet feudal, such as those in the Western Sudan." So, I mean, that's just more evidence to reinforce the fact that Africa was well on its way to evolving from, you know, communalism to feudalism. And I'm not saying that to say, because we saw what feudalism did to Europe and to other places, but it's still, we can't discard the fact that in these transitions, African societies still held onto those core principles of communalism. And it's infuriating because we were not able to see what those transitions were going to be like fully in their full maturity, being that it was interrupted by us being invaded by Europeans. And that is that's something that we really have to take into account, because that is not to say that these African societies did not have their contradictions, because it's true. We do see contradictions within African, you know, traditional African societies that existed in the past. But we are a people that we had the determination, we had the self-independence to determine what our communities, what our societies were going to look like.
Yes.
We had that power, but it was stripped away from us. And that is what we have to, that's what we have to internalize from this. Black power. Did you want to say anything else, Carmen?
No, you laid it out perfectly. You know, I really appreciated reading this chapter. And if anybody else has anything, please post it. You read that back from what you got from this. But I do think that it's important to recognize here that, one, we do need to kind of not be so surprised or so, taken aback when we realized that these types of developments did happen in Africa. We did have the skill, we had the intelligence. We were the first Africans on the planet, and we did have the capability of meeting our own needs. It may not have been in a capitalistic standpoint, and we didn't have that ingrained in us, but we still had the skill. We created water systems, we created an economic system, we created buildings, more than just what they would talk about. And not that there was anything wrong with this, but you know how they'll tell us, oh, you guys, mud huts, that's all you guys do, and that's not true. We see that here. And so I really appreciated studying these specific examples to show that there were the development that was present, that's ignored or not talked about when we're getting our colonial education. I'm sorry I had to take them glasses off. They were in my eyes. I was having a headache. Yeah.
But I really want to unite with what you just laid out, Comrade Nyah, and just to, just reiterate that visiting, these historical facts, studying works such as How Europe Underdeveloped Africa is part of the decolonization process. Because just like all of those things that Comrade Nyah just laid out, like, the ideologies of, Africa being this continent that was just full of, these random cannibalistic tribes that was eating each other, all of this just trash propaganda that has been fed to us. You have to understand that it influences how you look at Africa and how you look at African people. And with that disdain that has been forced into us, how does that relate to us struggling to liberate Africa? I don't want to fight for nobody worshiping trees or living in no huts and all this other kind of shit like that. That is going to influence how you view your brothers and sisters and where you stand in this fight for liberation. So it's necessary for us to discuss the waterworks, the stonework, the labor, the inventions, and everything that we see in Africa. We're talking about Africa, which is the birthplace of civilization, period. Humanity, period. So how do we get from being the birthplace of humanity to now we're nothing but a continent that is known for malaria, a disease that is given through goddamn mosquito bites?
Yeah.
How do we get from there to being here? That's the questions that we have to study. That's the questions that we have to understand, because if you don't let these ideals go that imperialism has placed into your head, it's only going to further the division that we see now. It's only going to diversion. It's only going to take you away from wanting to be involved in the fight for liberation. And that is what we're struggling for. That is what we're speaking to. What Walter Rodney is speaking to in this book. Yes. So y'all, we gotta keep that at the forefront of our minds. So
Alex says his read that back is, it should be reiterated, and this was mine too, that slavery as a mode of production was not present in any African society. Although some slaves were found where the decomposition of communal equality had gone furthest. It's important to recognize that the existence of slaves was not the same as slavery being a mode of production. Slavery as an institution is a European thing. Absolutely. Thank you for that.
And that, okay, let me read, okay, I gotta go. But, so, and I appreciate your read that back, Comrade Alex, because after that same portion that he reads, he says, "This is an outstanding feature illustrating the autonomy of the African path within the broader framework of universal advance. One of the paradoxes in studying this early period of African history is that it cannot be fully comprehended without first deepening our knowledge of the world at large, and yet the true picture of complexities of the development of man and society can only be drawn after intensive study of the non-neglected African continent." This is where it gets real. "There is no escaping the use of comparisons as an aid to clarity, and indeed the parallels have been narrowly restricted to Europe, even though there could also be provided by examples from Asian history." Listen to this. Therein lies the cultural imperialism, which makes it easier for the European educated African to recall the names like French captains in the Perusians, Hohenzollerns, rather than the Vietnamese dynasties of Ed and Tran, for the latter are either unknown to him or would be considered unimportant if known, or might even be just too difficult to pronounce. Y'all!
Wow, that's profound.
That is so profound. That is so profound. And this book was published in what, 1969?
Something like that.
1969, and we are in 2020. Whoa. We're going into 2020, but that still holds true to this day. It still holds true to this day.
So do y'all still think it's a coincidence that all of our revolution, like Walter Rodney was assassinated, Malcolm X was assassinated, when they bring you this type of truth, and then when it's learned, when you start to realize who you are and what type of, where you come from, and what you can do with this information, that becomes a danger to the status quo, to the powers that be. So I mean, this is why they have a problem with you taking interest in continental Africans. This is why they need to remind you don't have anything in common with them. They need to lie to you to tell you that. This is why they need to tell you that you don't, they hate y'all. Those lies that they propagate, that they hate you, and Africans hate African Americans and shit like that. I mean, this is why we do this. This is why we read this.
Right.
It's so profound.
Yes. So I'm a just, if you could, let's read the last paragraph of chapter 2, and we're at the conclusion of this chapter. So you want to just go ahead and read
where it says yet? Okay.
Yeah.
Yet it would be self-delusion to imagine that all things were exactly equal in Benin and in Holland. African society was already more aggressive, more expansionist. European society was already more aggressive, more expansionist, and more dynamic in producing new forms. The dynamism within Europe was contained within the merchant and the manufacturing class. In the galleries of the exchange at Amsterdam sat Dutch burghers, the ancestors of the modern bourgeoisie of industry and finance. This class in the 15th century Europe was able to push the feudal landowners forward or aside. They began to discard conservatism and to create the intellectual climate in which change was seen as desirable. A spirit of innovation arose in technology, and the transformation of the mode of production was quickened. When Europe and Africa established close relationships through trade, there was therefore already a slight edge in Europe's favor, an edge representing the difference between a fledgling capitalist society and one that was still emerging from communalism.
Black power. Thank you for that, Comrade Nyah. All right, comrades, so that concludes chapter 2 of How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. So that means next week we're going to begin chapter 3, which is entitled Africa's Contribution to European Capitalist Development, the Pre-Colonial Period.
I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, yes. So make sure if you haven't, hit us up for the PDF so we can get you in the group. As you can see, like what we're reading right now, I mean, it's so deep and powerful. And so chapter 3 is pretty much relatively short, so we're going to go ahead and cover the whole chapter, the entire chapter for next week Sunday. So again, please hit us up for the PDF. And we also have the audio book as well too. So while you cooking, while you cleaning, you can be listening and, just getting this political education, y'all. So I think we were able to raise $50 of our goal, but that doesn't mean we're stopped raising money. If you weren't able to donate today, please pass along the links. Speak to your friends and family members. Hit us up if you're in Atlanta. If you have family members in Atlanta who you think would want to support this initiative and volunteer
right.
Tell them to hit us up. We want everybody to get involved, okay? Again, Black Power.
All power to the people.
All power to the people. Go to CashApp $BlackHammerOrg. Go to GoFundMe.com/BlackHammerOrg, or go to BlackHammer.org and donate through there. January 18th, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. We at Woodruff Park in Hurt Park. We feeding our brothers and sisters. We speaking to the interests of our people, and we building for revolution. We going into the year 2020. This is the last episode of the Revolutionary Book Trap before the new year. So next week, we probably might even dress up again just to celebrate again. But
it'll be the first one.
Yeah, it'll be the first one of the new year. So, all right, comrades. Also, just really quickly, I want to just put out for our next public meeting, which is going to take place on New Year's Eve. The time has changed. It's going to be at 5 o'clock p.m. Just so you'll have time to get dressed to go out. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to be at a wedding, but I want you to attend, so make sure you be there and don't be square.
And I heard there's going to be a giveaway for a free hoodie, so show your ass up.
Black Power comrades, until next time, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll see y'all next time. Black Power!
Black Power.